Welcome. This is the third in a series of 4 classes called Beyond Returning. And today we're going to get into some practicality about, well, how can you go about being in the world in a way that'll facilitate what the theme of these 4 sessions is about. And that's the forward thrust of spirituality and the forward thrust of the purpose of there being a manifestation. So we could say that our normal or default setting is just plodding along, dealing with circumstances, thinking about the world in the way that we usually think about it. And that's fine. I mean, we do good things with our life and so on, but the possibilities of what we can do are way more than that. And that's what awakening is about in different spiritual traditions, only the emphasis that we're putting in this series is awakening in life, leading towards a further evolution of not only our own self in life, but as we talked about last time, the notion that the divine being evolves along with us, that it's an old Newtonian notion of God as the separated being up somewhere that we're disconnected from, that we're trying to reach some kind of goal that's usually thought of as being beyond this world and beyond this life. And as opposed to that, as we've talked about, what quantum physics has shown is that we live in a universe in which things are totally interconnected with everything else, and it makes no sense. It's like dividing by 0 doesn't make sense. It makes no sense to presume that there could be anything separated from the rest of the universe with a capital U, who's going to have this subjective way of analyzing the rest of the universe. We know that we have an impact on what we interact with. And so we understand things by virtue of our relationship. And our awakening in life takes place through our relationships, not just in the sense we usually think about relationships with friends and family and so on, but the way that we relate to everything, circumstances, nature, our inner life, and so on.
And part of the problem with this previous idea of scripting all of our spirituality and all of our growth and movement in a kind of return or compliance to an otherworldly norm is that it encourages an escape plan mentality when it comes to our life in this space. So then in the pre-Copernican world, but even in the Newtonian world, if all that has meaning is out there or up there, and then our job is to get to that place out there or up there, then it makes living in this place a lower kind of reality than that place to which we aspire. And I think we've said this before, but let's make sure we say it again, because I kind of believe that I'm a preacher. Anything good is worth saying more than once. And this is not Don and Jonathan. This is some really helpful, very important thinkers who are really trying to lead this way. If we create an escape plan understanding of our faith, or let's just speak more generally, if you're not a person of faith, if we create an escape plan understanding of our humanity, and that our job is to go to a different place than the world in which we live, then it makes how we treat that world, this current world in which we live, we can apologize for anything. We can apologize and explain why we treat this world the way we do, because we say our greater reality is returning to this greater sense or going away from this place to this other sense, rather than saying we are co-evolving in the midst of this world, and my evolution is tied up with your evolution. This world's growth is tied up in my growth, and not only are we in this, but so is the divine, that we're all in this life, in this milieu together, and we must treat this world and all of its creatures and all of its stuff as though the divine is already always right here and evolving with us. And if we don't, we do damage to one another, to the future others that might be there, and to the divine and God's self, and God's own self. You see how that works? It's vitally important that we recognize that what we're learning in quantum physics is not only a way to understand protons and neutrons and stuff, it's revealing a deep truth of who we are and who the divine is and how intimately and infinitely connected we might be, and how we're always unfolding, not trying to find our way to escape from this reality to another reality.
So let's look at some premises that perhaps have been a part of the way that we've thought about things. It's certainly been a way that religion and different spiritual traditions often have thought of things, that this world is either viewed as a fallen state of existence.
That's right.
In other words, it's messed up from what was before, and so we want to get back to what was before, or we want to fix it, put things back, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. When in actuality, manifestation is the ground on which this furtherance of divinity emerging in life takes place. It's the means by which this can happen, and it's the only means by which this can happen. It's by virtue of the relationship with anything in existence and what we think of as God or the transcendent. It's two sides of the coin. And another premise that is usually ingrained in us is things like the angelic realm, where people go after they die, or someplace else. It's the other side. Like Jonathan was saying, it's up there someplace. We're at this just low vibrational level, and we need to get to this better vibrational state, when in actuality it's no place but here. But the problem is our here, as we've talked about, is a very much constricted vantage point that cuts off our ability to experience the reality in which we truly exist. And because we don't recognize that that's what's going on, we normally don't even question it, and we, if that thought comes up, we go, well, that's pie in the sky. This is the only thing. This is where it's happening. But many people have had mystical experiences. I'll bet a majority of people who are here present today, or who are listening to this on YouTube, at some point in your life, you've had a mystical experience, whether or not you're part of any religious or spiritual tradition. And it may have been a spontaneous mystical experience, and it could have been brought about by some amazing place in nature, or some phenomena that you saw, or something, expression of beauty through a child, or through a poem, or through art, or whatever it might be. It temporarily took you to you thought, a different place. And that was a wonderful place. You'd like to get back to that place, but the problem is you never left that place. Your consciousness has been stuck in this place. So today we'd like to share with you some ways that we can use our way of being in the world that facilitate this process of opening to a deeper capacity for experiencing the way that the world is. What's a basic requirement? Presence. So if we're not present, forget about it. Nothing else is going to happen. But all of you physically present here, you are present, your bodies are sitting here, but there's different degrees to which you're present right now. Some of you are thinking about what you're going to do later today, or what happened yesterday, or you may have some issue you're worried about. This is normal. No criticism here, but that keeps you from really being present right here. So let's do just a simple little practice of presence. Okay, so we're going to start with the most basic aspect of presence, and you can close your eyes if you want, if that makes it easier for you. Physical presence. So just allow yourself to become present to your body, listening to this. And just be aware of sensations in your body, places that are tense, places that feel good. Maybe some places feel numb. Feel the sensation, if you're sitting in a chair, of your body on the chair, or your feet on the ground. Become aware of the sensations of the air moving in the room, whether it's heat or air conditioning, depending on where you are when you are listening to this. And now add to this being present to your breath. Simplest spiritual practice, but one of the most important. And just without trying to change anything, be aware of the air. As you breathe naturally, the air coming in and out. And now expand the scope of that presence and recognize that what's conveyed in that air is much more than the oxygen that you take in and the carbon dioxide that you breathe out. We're taking in things that aren't visible to us. We're taking in light that has come from distant stars that may not even exist anymore. It doesn't matter if it's daytime or nighttime. The kinds of energy that travel through space, different kinds of cosmic rays, all that's being carried in. So feel that your breath now is reaching all the parts of your body, all the organs, the muscles, the nerves, the tissues. As you inhale, and feel now that you are taking in light as well. We are taking in light, taking in photons. And feel that light now reaching the cells of your body and enlivening the cells. And the cells respond by releasing a light that comes from them, a light that's been changed. And as you exhale, more than just the carbon dioxide, be aware of the light that emerges from your being, not just through the breath, but emerges from the whole atmosphere of your being and goes out into space at 186,000 miles per second. And however old you are, that many years that light has traveled into space, and you can imagine the distance it's reached stars that many light years away. So now you're beginning to allow presence to open up to something more than just a static awareness. You're allowing presence to opening up to something that is emerging continually with each breath. And we've just started now with physical presence. So let's keep that channel going, and shift your attention to your mental world, your mind, your thoughts. And you may be aware of thoughts arising through your mind, this kind of random stream of consciousness thoughts that we have a tendency to latch onto and want to continue and feed, but just let them go like clouds floating across the sky. Just be aware of these thoughts arise, and some of them don't even come from you. You're picking up things that come from the environment, from other people, from influences not necessarily present right now, it could be from the past. And let all these thoughts just settle into the background. So let yourself become present on the mental level to awareness. Awareness to what may emerge through what you're in relationship with an openness to discover something that you hadn't known before, that you hadn't experienced before. And you may feel a sense of peace, a sense of deepening, a sense of expansiveness of your being, because our being does not stop at the boundaries of our skin. We have energy fields around our body. We have magnetic energy fields, bioluminescent energy fields. And now let's keep this channel going, keep the physical awareness presence, now the mental awareness, and shift to the realm of the heart, the emotional sphere of our being, and become aware of emotions that are going on right now. They may be happy ones, sad ones, worried ones, all sorts. And just allow yourself to be present to those without trying to change them, analyze them. And see if you can become present to a sense of openness in your heart, where your heart begins to feel very vast. And these emotions now are just like little ripples on the ocean of the domain of your heart. One more layer. Now allow yourself to become present to the spiritual aspect of your being, subtle aspect. And beginning to experience and discover the reality that we live and exist on many, many levels of vibration. Just like electrons have different orbitals around an atom, there are different vibrational levels of existence. The ones that are visible and manifest, and there's the subtle ones. These are like the subtle realms that mystics give different names to. The Sufis, the jinn realm, the angelic realm, and other traditions have so many realms of angels and archangels and so on. But these are all just different vibrational realms on which beings exist. They are real, but we exist on those realms as well. The true nature of our being is so much vaster than our physical self. So without trying to conceptualize it or to prefigure what it's supposed to be like, just set an intention to allow yourself to be open to experience this vastness, multidimensional nature of your being. It's like going from hearing a single pure frequency of sound to now experiencing overtones and undertones and harmonics, chords. And now with this much fuller than our usual degree of presence, visualize yourself just experiencing day-to-day circumstances in your life relating to people, things you have to take care of, issues, concerns, and so on, with this very much expanded sense of presence. And this now opens up possibilities for what can emerge in these different relationships and circumstances, far beyond what was possible with your separated dualistic way of experiencing. So imagine that, just becoming fully present to what is, not to some imaginary thing or something that you have to spend years and years getting to, but just allowing yourself to open to the reality of who you are and bringing that to your way of being in circumstances. That in and of itself is the catalyst for transformation, not just in yourself, but in everything that you're in relationship with. And the fruit of that transformation doesn't just accrue to you or whoever or whatever else is in that circumstance. It accrues to all of existence, including the divine being. So I had a series of classes in the past called Awakening as a Service to Humanity, and this is what I meant by that. You are actually, I could have called it as a service to the universe. You are contributing to the wisdom that unfolds in all of existence that can only come by virtue of the uniqueness of your being when you bring this degree of presence.
Thank you. Thomas Keating, a monk and one of the great leaders in the, I'll say, Christian tradition of what we call centering prayer. But also importantly, Keating did not do his work only within Christianity. He was a friend of mystics, from the Dalai Lama to seekers and contemplatives throughout all tradition. Would say it this way. As he introduced this idea of oneness, presence, of full presence, he would say, imagine the relationship that you had with your beloved at its earliest stages, and all of the physicality and the electricity, all of the touchness of it. And then imagine the relationship you have with your beloved after you've been together for some time, and there increasingly becomes a simpatico of words, where there are no longer words needed for some things. We just know stuff like one another knows. And then imagine your relationship with your beloved as you move beyond words and you go into your kind of thoughts and your ideas, and you find yourself connected to your beloved in a way that you kind of know, though you might be apart, what the other is thinking. And there's energy that connects to your beloved, even though you might be far away. And then imagine a relationship with your beloved where even when you're together and you're sitting with one another and you're in full space, no longer do you need the touch, and no longer do you need the words, and no longer do you need the exchange of ideas, but just being present and taking a breath next to one another becomes the nourishment and the presence that is needed for that relationship, that full breath. And then he said this, I love it, he said, did you ever have an aunt or grandparent, aunt and uncle or grandparents who just could sit with one another in the same room, having been together for so many years, and that was sufficient beyond words for their presence with one another? That's just a fragment of what the mystics are trying to teach us about being present with ourselves, with creation, with all, with the divine, with one another, with every atom, every whisper, as you're describing it, with the whole universe. That's the communion that we're seeking to build. We used to say, that's the relationship I want to have with God. And that's not a bad thing to say. It just narrows the idea, unfortunately, to only thinking about, I'm having a relationship with God like I have a relationship with Don. Nice to see you, Don. How you doing? And then we leave one another. No, we're talking about a relationship that becomes fully transcendent over time, beyond words, beyond any metaphorical ability to make it work in our heads, this fullness of presence. And that metaphor, I thought, for me at least, as I heard Keating say this, was a helpful metaphor for me to hold on to And that's really all metaphors do, is help us hold their little holding places, like climbing a rock wall, another metaphor. Metaphors are the metaphors. We're just a little holding place as we make this journey. And that might be a metaphor that helps, at least for me. That's been a helpful metaphor. Is I'm looking for the breath beyond breath, the connectedness beyond connectedness, the consciousness beyond awareness of consciousness. And as you said, Don, what I love is that we've experienced it. Most of us have. My contention is that all of us have, at least the doorsteps of that. And that doorstep is not it. But what we do is we make the doorstep it. So we have those experiences in places like holy places, like mountaintops. And then we say, this must be it. So then we build a place on the mountaintop because that's it. And that's not it. We do this in our practices with one another. There was a group of people a long time ago who shared a meal with one another. And their teacher shared a meal with them. And in so doing, he shared a meal with them that became mind-blowingly transcendent and opened their eyes to a level of consciousness they've never considered before. That meal could mean more than food on plate. It might mean oneness, and it might be at a very cellular, without the words that they had at the time, but microbiological level. That union might be as understanding how a piece of bread becomes all of our bodies. That might be the oneness that we can experience. But what those people did, and their descendants did shortly after, is say, then the meal is it. And what the teacher was saying is, the meal is not it. The meal is the doorway to it, but it's not it. Keep going through the door. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And we do that all the time. So I think that's what's helpful about that, Don, that practice, is that what you've given us is a living practice that we might adopt, but recognize that the practice is not it. The teacher is not it. The wise one or the guru or whoever or the church or the building or the prayer book in my case or anything, that's not it. It's always a doorway to the full further expanse. And like most creatures, we tend to allow ourselves to be limited to our confines. Goldfish do that. I don't know if you know that goldfish will do that. You'll learn this when you're a parent and you have a kid who gets a goldfish at a county fair. It's a really small goldfish when they get it. But if you put it in a big fish tank by itself, guess what it becomes? A really big goldfish. Ours was named Goliath. Because goldfish expand to the surroundings, but no further. That's a confine that we're saying is not a destiny for us to live with. We are created to have access beyond. We really are. But we tend to allow ourselves to be limited by our physicality and to be only as big as the surroundings in which we find ourselves, when really what we're called to be is transcendent beings.
Well, I love this emphasis on the door is not it. I like to say everything, without exception, is a potential portal to the sacred, but the portal is not the point. And even what emerges in that is not the end point. It's not the destination. It's the entry into a much fuller and deeper way of being in existence in relationship with everything. And human nature, we pull back into our usual constricted way of consciousness. If we're working on our spiritual growth, we do practices which are wonderful and very important, and they help us to come to these openings, and we'll have usually a temporary experience, which the Sufis call a hal, H-A-L experience, but then we go back to our usual modality. But that experience wasn't the point. It was a sneak preview of a much richer way of being that we're all capable of. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the notion of...
Pause for questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's have a little pause for questions here. So anyone have questions or comments about what we said? And please speak up because it's being recorded. Yes, John.
I'll keep my phone because I wrote it on the phone.
Thanks a lot.
I'm always always coming back to this because I run into this at work a lot. I'm a hospice chaplain, and so I deal with people when they're dealing with big issues and mysteries of life. And I find there's still this kind of divided view of the world and how they express what they're going through. And so if what you're saying, both of you saying, I'm guessing that basically this evolutionary journey we're on, that it's more than an individual enterprise. It's not my journey I tend to. It's I am part of everyone else's. And then I begin to, understand that that's what you're saying, and then it makes that whole thing of, I guess, to borrow a word, salvation, the work of salvation, you want to call it. It's more than just a moral checkup on each other. It's like I'm helping you evolve just as much as I'm trying to help myself evolve. That's what I'm kind of hearing. And then with that divided worldview, I get a lot of people when they come to the near death, it's still a divided view to where I go somewhere, when God takes me, or, and I appreciate the language. That's what they understand. But, my understanding, and if I'm digging what you're getting to, it's kind of like, well, after death, we don't go anywhere because we're everywhere. Is how I'm understanding it. So I'm just saying, is that what y'all are basically saying?
Yes, I wouldn't tell somebody that on the doorstep of their death, as you and I know you would not, because of pastoral concerns about that. However, it's back to the idea of metaphor. As metaphorical beings, we're confined, I think, often unwittingly, to the metaphors or the images or the handholds with which we either have been instructed or we've allowed ourselves to be confined by, right? And I think that's how I approach that, which is at that hour, as you and I have been together in that hour with one another. If that works, okay. However that helps.
Yeah, and I would say, and again, I wouldn't say it to them, but to respond to your question, the person's consciousness now has entered a different vibrational realm of being, which in their perception is someplace else.
Right.
But reality's kind of built in that helps us make sense of experiences. And that's why when people have near-death experiences, if they're religious, if they're a Christian, they're not going to see Buddha.
No.
If they're a Buddhist, they probably will see Buddha. Does that mean, this one's more real than that one? No, it means that the universe is compassionate enough to bring that deepening of relationship in a way that fits with a person's belief system. And in terms of, it's not just us. The Sufis say when someone gets initiated, they're joining a caravan of kindred souls that goes beyond time and space, in which the kindred souls are traveling together on the journey, but everyone has got their unique journey. They're not just like sheep all doing the same thing. So we very much have our individual process of awakening and our very important, unique contribution to the wisdom of the universe. But that doesn't happen in isolation. It happens by virtue of our relationship with everything that's ever happened in our whole life.
And this is where, when you mentioned salvation, this is where, I forget who the teacher was, but one teacher in the Christianity said, as we keep talking about this and go further and further into this idea of love, into this idea of Christ, into this idea of Christ as an understanding that is more expansive than limiting, it invariably will lead us to a kind of universalism. And let's just be honest, if what we're talking about is a universality of life and of love and of energy, then yes, we're talking about that. And it's okay as human beings to approach that with the portals with which we are most familiar and are most compassionately attuned. That doesn't mean that there aren't other portals. Now, that sounds a little bit like what Jesus said someplace. He says it in the Gospel of John, and we read it at funerals a lot. He talks about having sheep, and there's lots of these sheep, and I'm the good shepherd, but then he leaves this little nugget in there, and it's interesting to tell whether this is Jesus or John, either one of them, John, the writer of the Gospel. He says, but I have other sheep from other folds. I'm going to go include all of them as well, so there will be one sheep, one group, all in this. And that expansive nugget is, I think, and I believe, and I'm not alone in this, is a little insight to a wisdom understanding that is being more universal than limiting. That there's an expansiveness in this reality in which we're sharing. Salvation then might be understood as the aha, at least how I understand it, that clues me into that expansiveness. That, oh, this is life. Oh. And I don't think salvation is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. No, and I don't know many religious teachers, mystics particularly, who would ever say that being saved is the thing. There's a lot of different language, but it's about being this unfolding, this unfolding.
And there were some other questions?
Yeah, another question, Tom.
Yes.
Question, Don, when you led us through the exercise.
Speak up a little bit, please.
When you led us through the exercise about our thoughts, and you said, all the thoughts, and there can be thoughts that are even ours, thoughts from the past. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
Yes. Can you talk more about that?
Well, yes. I mean, let's say someone has, I'll use an example, low self-esteem. So the thoughts might be a replay of many, many events in their life where they felt like failures and things people said to them, you're never going to amount to anything. Those thoughts that have been identified with as really belonging to them, but they've really come from someplace else, somebody else. Other questions? Yes, Kyle.
Hi, good morning, guys. Mystical experiences, not using them as a doorway, but what would you say to somebody who, maybe doesn't feel like they have enough experiences to give them the faith to keep studying and practicing and applying towards this path? Like, I don't even know why the heck I'm here, right? Like, I'm the youngest person in the room. I don't know if that's like... Because
that was me a minute ago, until you came in.
I don't know why I'm here, right? There's a certain level of faith, and I tend to lose that every once in a while, in my ignorance, in my actions in life. I don't have that mystical experience to draw back to every time and go, oh, hey, remember that one time when you felt fully connected to the whole universe? That's why you're doing what you're doing now. What would you say to somebody like me, or somebody that is coming to you with this crisis of faith?
Well, I would say, and I'm glad you raised that question.
Thank you.
Having a mystical experience is no measure of someone's spirituality. Some people by nature are more prone. Some people can see auras that have never done any spiritual practices. That doesn't mean they're more spiritual than someone else. I think what helps is to have a guide on the journey, a teacher that you feel a connection with, that you respect, and perhaps for a good while on the journey, you can borrow, so to speak, the confidence from the teacher saying, like, I'm not your guide or teacher, but I'll say this to you. I am 100% confident that you can engage in a way of being in the world that over time will help you to experience more and more of what we've been talking about here. And I would say that to anybody.
Same here.
And sometimes the evidence of that we can't see in ourselves, but other people can say to us, you really have changed, what's going on, but you don't recognize it. You remember as we grow up, your parents, or maybe you put little lines on the wall, how tall you are. Well, you can't tell that you're a fraction of a millimeter taller the next day, but over time, and you can see this in someone else. And I have people that I do guide in the Sufi group we belong to who have changed dramatically. And sometimes it takes them a while to recognize that change, but at some point they'll say, things really do seem different to me. I really feel more balanced in life. I feel more centered. Well, that's wonderful. So I would say that it isn't the thing for everyone to sit with their eyes closed and do practices and meditate. There's many, many other ways to engage in the process of awakening with your eyes open in the world. So it has to be something that's a fit for you. But thank you for asking.
If I can add something to that, Jim, just a second. If I can add something to that as well. Many times I'm asked about what are we doing in the church? And I was asked this most recently at a gathering when somebody says, what if you don't believe any of this stuff that we're talking about? It was a theology conference. What if you don't believe it? What if you don't get it? How does that allow me to be in the church, and how does that make me a Christian? Okay, so here's, and particularly this was a gathering of Christians who self-identified as Christians. And here's how I respond to that. But not only me, how the church responds to this, but I don't think we say it very well, which is this. The church is not a community of belief. The church is not a community of agreement. The church is most importantly a community of practice. And not practice as in only this contemplative practices. That's one set of practices. But primarily, it's a community of practicing life. And what we're trying to do, and what most religions are trying to do, is not help people fit into a particular experience that we might call mysticism, or a particular experience that we might call insight or wisdom, whatever. No. That's not the work of religion in the world. The work of religion in the world, the work of organized communities in the world, is to develop communities of practice that love the world. That's really, if I were to describe what Christianity is and what the church is, that's all it is. There's no check mark that you believe this, and no check mark that you've had this experience when you walk into church on Sunday. What we agreed is this: are we going to have meals together? That's our central ritual. Are we going to listen to wisdom teaching that's older than us so that we don't rely on our own narrow understanding? Are we going to hear preachers say stuff that we might agree with or might not agree with? Are we going to pray for one another out of love and hold one another carefully? And then, are we going to go help people? Are we going to go out into the world like Jesus did, and when we see people who are hungry, feed them, and when we see people who are broken, be present with them? Are we going to do that set of practices that are very real? Mysticism, then, in the Christian tradition, emerges in the midst of that. In the midst of that. At least in Christianity, mysticism has never been the only goal of a religious community. Even the most rigorous, mystical, contemplative, spiritual communities have practices of care, of love, of nourishment, of feeding, of compassion. And that's not just Christianity, that's all of them. That you don't just come together and sit together, you actually do the thing. Are you hungry? Well, let's go find some food and let's make that happen, right? Those practices are the doorways into that, okay? And there's more to say about that, but that might unplug some of the, what am I doing here? Well, if none of us gets what the other one is doing, and I'll just be honest, when it comes to contemplative spirituality, I'm not a sitter. I like to sit, but I'm much more a walker. And that is a different kind of practice. And there's depths of that practice as well. I would love to be a sitter. I would love someday to find myself able to sit still. I can't do it. And maybe I don't want to do it, and that's cool too. I own that. Okay? But if there's a beautiful day outside, why am I? Every Sunday morning I wonder why I'm inside. Because I want to be out there. And here I am doing this priesty thing. And so that is my set of practices. But in the middle of that's my set of personality, how I do spirituality. But what we share is a shared understanding of practices that holds us together, that changes the world and ultimately changes the world. Sorry,
okay, you had a question?
Jim got back to you. Yeah, Jim.
It is said that the lead dog in a dog sled pulls just as much weight, is subjected to just as much cold, just as much wind, and just as much noisy barking. The difference between the lead dog and the other dogs is that it has a better view.
That's helpful. That's a helpful metaphor. Thank you.
So, okay, one more question. We've got a few more things, at least I have a few more things I'd like to say. Okay, so I'd like to talk about transmission.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about, Jonathan's been talking about the church, the significance is the community. I talked about initiation, a community of kindred seeking souls. So, and different traditions talk about the transmissions of that tradition. Like in the Sufis, there's a lineage that goes back hundreds of years of the teachers and then their followers and so on, that the idea is to be able to tap into that transmission of wisdom. But oftentimes people think of that as, oh, that is wonderful stuff, and it absolutely is, but think of it as being something fixed. It's been the wisdom that just comes from these beings in the past, and then usually not feeling like, well, what do I have to do with this transmission? Well, the best I can hope for is to tap into it, but certainly it would be presumptuous of me to think that I have something to contribute. Well, guess what? Everybody has something to contribute to the transmission of life. And when we engage in circumstances in this way that leads to a portal that opens to the sacred, it's because we've engaged in a two-way transmission, not one way, not from us just broadcasting, but the circulation of light between our being and the light that comes from another person, something in nature, fill in the blank with whatever you want. There's an interplay of these two lights that now brings about the possibility of a revelation that could not take place from just me, and it couldn't take place from whoever's on the other end of it. It can only take place by the rich interplay of the uniqueness of these two expressions of divine life that come through each being in a unique way. And so another way to kind of sum up what at least I'm hoping comes across in this is participating in this ongoing evolution of wisdom and emergence of divinity in the world. A way to think about that is engaging in a living transmission that takes place in relationship with anything and everything that we are in relationship with. And it's a rich transmission, it's a living transmission, it's an evolving transmission, and we can all become capable of that. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's opening up in a way where we've all had this happen. You're having a conversation with a good friend. Diane and I have this happen so many times, and we'll start talking about something. Same thing with Jonathan and me. And at a certain point, some discoveries are coming through that we'd never thought of before. It happens when we're presenting classes. I mean, almost always if I'm presenting a class, I'll find myself saying something I had never thought of before, because it's emerging not from the storehouse that a file in my brain I forgot about, but it's emerging by virtue of all of you listening and connecting in a way, and like Jonathan was talking about, this connection doesn't have to have words about it. Just sitting, there's a richness of the fields of our being interplaying with each other, and it brings about an understanding that couldn't happen otherwise. So how much richer can our life be if we at least mindfully at sometimes during the day just open to that possibility of experience with whatever's going on.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. It's one of the reasons, as you're describing it, my mind's eye is going all these places where I kind of know where I can access that. And I don't know if you have places where you can reliably say it's going to be that moment. For me, it's live music. I love live music, particularly I'm a rock and roll guy. I love the electric guitar. I love the moment when there's a group that is playing, particularly the guitar. I like drummers. I mean, I'm a drummer. I like drummers as well, but there's something about when a guitar soloist just hits that moment in a live experience where you know that something else is happening, that they've left the script, that they've left the formula. I love it with violin. I love any kind of improvisational moment when that kind of happens. But it also happens at a baseball game when somebody makes an incredible play. It also happens, and I'm just watching it, but it also happens when I know you share your pictures, and I can feel as you share the photos of the birds that you've taken and the sunrises, I can feel your energy and your presence vibrating in that moment. You see, that's how accessible it is. That's really how accessible it is. It's this term of kairos, that there's this idea that time and space and energy, all of that is fully here. And at the same time, not just here. It's this fullness. It's called time fullness. That this, and you and I do have it in conversation. And it's just one of those things, and literally how this will happen, and you have this happen with your friends, I'm sure, where you reach a point in the conversation where you just go, wow. Because there's nothing else. It's just there you are. That's what we're talking about. That's that limit, and that's not it, but it's a doorway to the it.
And a little add-on to this, you know that song, "Oh my soul, it magnifies the Lord and delights in his name"? Well, if I was going to add another verse to this, it would be that God delights in your name just as much, or perhaps exponentially more. It's not a one-way thing. You're just sending something, that you're feeling something, but you are bringing delight to the divine being by the divine discovering something about the divine's own self that you are a unique expression of, that couldn't come, that hasn't come through the countless eons and perhaps other universes that existed before this one. It just came right now in that experience that you had. So imagine bringing delight to God. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Why stop? We can keep going.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
One more. We have one more of these next week.
You do need to go to church.